Hello and welcome to the Ralph the Movie Maker podcast. I'm Ralph the Movie Maker. We're here to talk about two movies today, actually. The first one is just called Eraser from the year 1996, directed by Chuck Russell and starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the second movie we're going to talk about is Eraser Reborn or Resurrections, whatever the hell it's called. It's a remake or a reboot or a prequel or a sequel or whatever of the original Eraser film. And that one is really terrible, but let's just get started with the 1996 Eraser, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. And to talk about this film and give it some context, we really have to start back in the 80s with Arnold Schwarzenegger because, this is his film. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger's film. It's his. It's made around the time where he's a huge action star. He's made to sell action movies. If you want to see the truly great Arnold action films, you can go to the 80s, of course. Terminator, Predator, many other films. Even Commando was like light fun. That's a pretty iconic film, and definitely his time. It was his time where he was a huge movie star, and he would sell action movies like this. People go see movies with him in it, like hotcakes. It's just like he was a huge star. That's basically the point I'm making, and obviously a very recognizable, charismatic actor, Arnold, and around the time of the 90s, he wasn't as successful, and recently wanting to rewatch some of Arnold's films or wanting to watch new ones I haven't seen. I was looking more toward the 90s because I hadn't seen a lot of those movies. Obviously, I'd seen the great ones, Predator, and whatever those. And the 90s, that was more of a downslope in his career. He wasn't doing bad. But it was certainly not as successful a time for him in his career as the 80s was. Because the 80s, that was his decade, and the 90s was him kind of falling off the peak a little bit. And he was in a bunch of crappy action movies that you haven't even heard of necessarily. And he was in crappy action movies in the 80s too, and even before that maybe, but what distinguishes those is that they were successful and had some cultural impact, whether it be positive or negative. In the 90s, he really just was not as relevant, and his action movies weren't as relevant. So anyway, this leads us into the 1996 film Eraser, and Eraser is about a guy who erases people, and that's what Arnold says in the movie. I'm an eraser, and I will erase you. You would just been erased.
Yeah? You've just been erased.
And that's the whole movie. It's Arnold is an eraser. He's like a guy who wipes people off the grid, fakes their death, and then puts them in some witness protection kind of thing. And he's like an even more sophisticated and advanced witness protection program. And that's basically how they sell the movies. Arnold's this badass guy. He has to save this woman who's working undercover for the FBI, stealing some files off of James Cromwell. There's some good actors in this movie, I will say that. James Caan is in the movie as the villain. He was very good antagonist. I liked him in the movie. Catherine Brewster, Sarah Connor, John Connor. He is funny in this movie, and it's hard for me to take Arnold seriously in anything because he's just this big dude. The whole movie, this Eraser movie as a whole, is just kind of average to me. It doesn't really speak to me all too much. I mean, I did want to watch an action movie with Arnold, and I did get that. It was just kind of standard, bland. I'm yeah, I see why this is one of those ones that was forgotten about, as opposed to some of the other Arnold Schwarzenegger action movies from earlier in his career, like the Terminators and the Predators and whatever, those kinds of movies. I was originally watching Last Action Hero on Netflix, and that was a bit too kiddie for me, so I just switched it to Eraser. And it's definitely more of a mature action movie. I'd say it's geared more toward adults because there is shooting and blood and that kind of thing. It was kind of fun at times. I just, I'm struggling to remember a lot about it. I think that's not a great thing about it. It was just very standard action movie fare for me. I did get a lot out of the nostalgia factor. I do like watching 90s movies. It feels very 90s, this movie, and it was nice seeing Arnold in an action movie doing stunts and doing cool stuff sometimes, and he has those classic action movie lines. I guess the one of this movie is supposed to be you've just been erased. but I'm a Terminator. So that was like the whole movie. That's Eraser. that's the Eraser film to me. It's like, okay, it was an 80s or it was a 90s action movie trying to be an 80s action movie, and it was Arnold like kind of when he's in the downslope of his career, but he's not too bad yet. I've come to erase you. So yeah, that's Eraser. What I really want to talk about here is Eraser Reborn, which is a new film. It came out this year. I said I don't remember a lot about the first Eraser, the Arnold one, but I've seen that movie a couple weeks ago, and there are still things I actually still remember about it, like the ending and whatever, certain things that happen in it. This movie I just watched yesterday. I can't remember shit from it. I don't remember anything that happened. And yes, it's like it is trying to be a reboot or a remake or sequel or something of Eraser. They make constant callbacks to the first movie, even if it doesn't make sense. Like, it's like, why would these characters be saying these same lines? I guess maybe they work for the same organization.
You've just been erased.
There's this whole scene at the end of the first Eraser where they fake their death. They, like, blow up a car and fake their death. And the same exact thing happens in this movie at the end. Yeah, it's like all the same shit. And the acting is really terrible, really wooden and bland. Man, the ending of this movie, though, made me laugh really hard. And that's the point where I went like, okay, this is not just a like terrible movie, like a really terrible movie. This is one of those terribly bad movies that I will remember, maybe rewatch one day, because it's just so damn funny. It's fucking hilarious. Like the scene at the end when the villain is killed. Spoiler, you didn't know an antagonist is going to be killed in a freaking action movie. But after like a really boring, bland action scene that is basically just a remake of the action scene from the original Eraser, where they're like in like some kind of port and they're jumping on kind of crates and there's a boat and there's like shootouts going on, whatever. She's like, oh, I gotta get out of here because they're trying to kill me. And then the Eraser comes and he's like, you have been erased.
Congratulations. You've just been erased.
And they bring her to South Africa. It's like, okay, here's your new home. You can live in South Africa now for a week or whatever until we clear up this thing. Because they're in South Africa, there's all kinds of scenes where, like, just random animals show up. That, like, there's a scene where an ostrich shows up in her apartment for no reason. The scene is, like, completely pointless.
Back off!
So you met Janice, huh?
They never mention it again. Like, the Eraser guy walks in and he's like, oh, there's an ostrich in here. Get out of here. And, like, that's the end of that shit. And there's, like, a bunch of shitty scenes like that where they just run into animals for no reason.
This way? Not this way? Not this way?
Okay, so getting back to that ending scene, they find a rhino or something in the crate. They let it go, and then the bad guy is like trapped under a bunch of rubble or something. The Eraser guy, the good guy, breaks him out of the rubble and like frees him. But then the bad guy turns on him. He's like, see, I got you. You thought I didn't have a gun, but I have a gun and I'm going to kill you even though you tried to save me or whatever. And then from out of nowhere, that rhino comes from the background and kills the bad guy.
You've just been erased.
I can't even bring myself to give this a 1 star because it's so fucking inept and stupid. Like, there's nothing interesting going on here at all. Like, when I was looking back and I'm like, was there anything actually engaging about this film? Like, was anyone engaged in even making it even? Like, did they seem like they wanted to make this movie? No. It seemed like a total cash grab. The best parts of the movie are the parts that are so bad that they're funny.
You've just been erased.
Yeah, I just can't recommend it enough. I was like, oh, this is lovely. This is just a lovely train wreck. This is just a lovely disaster of epic proportions. I'm like, oh man, I'm glad we still get movies like this. I'm still glad we get movies that are total shit and it's just like not even original. Like, you're literally remaking like the lowest common denominator. You're remaking a bad Arnold 90s action movie. Like that's what this movie is. It's a remake of a movie no one even fucking remembers. Like no one even gives a shit about. Like you might as well have made it an original movie because I doubt people will even notice the connections that I made watching these two movies almost back to back. I guess weeks apart from each other. But yeah, I was like, oh yeah, they reused the same lines. Like you've just been erased or whatever. Certain plot beats are the same. Like the whole opening of the movie where he's like trying to rescue some family that's been caught or something. It's like the exact same shit as the original movie. It's just the same plot beats. It's just like let's do all the same shit again, except make it even worse. Just like it instead of being like bland or kind of like average, mediocre. It's like this movie sucks. Like it's shit.
I can't let you do that.
I need your badge, Pollard.
Thanks for watching that, and now we're going to move on to questions. I have a question thread posted on the RTMM podcast Reddit, which there's a link to in the description, and if you leave your question there, I will be sure to answer it in the near future. So be sure to leave your questions on the Ralph the Movie Maker podcast Reddit. All right, so first of all, let's go. This question from Muhammad Tala Muhammad Tala 786. Rather, do you listen to podcasts? That's his question. Not really. I don't really listen to many podcasts. I listen to my own. So yeah, thanks for listening to mine, and hopefully you religiously watch my podcasts. This is from Mr. McDan. His question is, what do you imagine the future of the DC expanding universe to be? Is there any hope left? Well, no, but also a little. There's a little bit of hope left, like a tiny speck of hope because of James Gunn. And I'd say like if I was in James Gunn's position right now, I had to like reorganize the DCU, or the DCU or whatever the fuck it's called now. I would say like, okay, you got some good actors there. You got like at least recognizable people in the role. Like I wouldn't get rid of like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. I wouldn't get rid of Jason Momoa as Aquaman. I thought they were fine for the part. Like everyone knows them as those parts now. Just like leave that alone. I think that's fine. Same with Henry Cavill as Superman. He's back. That's fine. Like keep him as Superman. You know, obviously they need to completely shift the characters away from what Zack Snyder was trying to do. Because the movies, I think, started to take off a bit better once they abandoned the Snyderverse kind of bullshit. Like Aquaman just being its own movie. Wonder Woman's kind of its own movie, although it's kind of drenched in Zack Snyder dreary dread and fucking bullshit. But it's really like the cast members that couldn't come back. Obviously, Ben Affleck, I don't think wants to do it. Ezra Miller can't come back. So yeah, you need to scrap those people. Cyborg can't come back. So it's just like, okay, so you need to recast Batman. Maybe you put Robert Pattinson in there. You need to have a good Green Lantern. That's like what they're missing. I mean, so much time has just been wasted here. Like that would be my first thing. Is like, yeah, recast all those people. Stay away from the Zack Snyder shit, the dreary bullshit that he does, and then, you know, once you have James Gunn in there, you can add some like levity and humor and whatever, like add some of that kind of shit. And yeah, just like try to like write something good. I'd say like that's a huge thing. Like it could be good. It could be, you know, serious. It could be funny. It could be a blend of both. That's fine. Just it needs to be good. It needs to be like redeeming in some way and actually be like, oh, that's like a clever spin on the same superhero schmaltz we've seen, as opposed to like what most DC movies are, which are fucking boring, bland shit. They're so far behind in terms of Marvel. I don't even have faith that they will even be able to keep up at this point. But there is something to be said about like kind of starting fresh. Like their slate is kind of clean, or at least it should be at this point. Like they're starting from the beginning of making a universe, and that can be fun and it can be intriguing. And you know, Marvel at this point is kind of played out. I think we've had just about 30 movies. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. And yeah, it's just like we need something fresh, and that could be what DC is bringing us. But Man, especially at this point, I do not have faith in them. It's just they keep making shitty movies. They keep making movies that I do not like. I don't like Aquaman. I don't like Wonder Woman. I don't like Black Adam. I don't like a lot of the shit they've done. I just don't like it. I like Shazam. I like the Batman, but those seem so kind of separate from the rest of the shit going on. Like the reason those movies work is because they do kind of do their own thing, and they're not trying to be tied down by a universe or anything. And to be fair, that's why a lot of the Marvel movies work. Like Guardians 1 and 2 work because they're not really tied into the MCU all that much. And I guess they are, like Thanos being in Guardians 1 or whatever. It's just, it was so much more organic and less annoying than it was in like Batman v Superman. When you're watching the movie, you're like, all right, they're clearly trying to start something here. They're clearly trying to go somewhere with this universe and like sending a Batman, Wonder Woman. They're gonna give them sequels or whatever, but it just did not come together at all. The movie was fucking boring, And like, yeah, I try to have more dimension with criticism than just calling something boring, but that's exactly what those movies are. They're fucking dull as shit. And as long as these new DC movies are not dull as shit, then they're an improvement. But yeah, that's pretty much as fucking bad as a superhero movie can get. Is those Snyder ones? I mean, they're fucking unbelievable. People are like, "Oh, you didn't like the Snyder cut?" I'm like, "Did you even watch the whole fucking thing of the Snyder cut? Did you even watch that entire thing? It's fucking 4 hours long. Did you seriously sit through the whole thing? Like, what else are you fucking doing with your life, dude? I don't have 4 hours to spare on anything except maybe, I don't know." Okay. I guess that's all for this week. That's all we got for today, folks. So thanks for watching and listening. Listen on Spotify and iTunes and Google Podcasts. We're on all those things. And yeah, just stay fresh, stay hello fresh, and happy Shrek.